Welcome to the Thoughtful Gamer Podcast, Episode 8, the Indie Cast. Here with me today is Matt.
Hey, I'm back.
Indeed. And we're going to be talking about some indie games. I guess indie games, right? I suppose if they're publishing under their own company, that's an indie game.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, indie enough that the designers are coming around locally to have people play their games.
That's true.
Yeah.
How many games do you have to publish before you cease being an indie game creator?
I don't know. That's like the question of how much beer do you have to brew before you cease to be a craft brewer?
I believe that's actually legally defined, though.
Yeah, but who cares about the legalities of that? Is Sam Adams a craft brewer?
I believe legally no.
Legally no?
I don't remember.
Probably not.
Actually, I think they might be the largest one. They're like just under the limit. I don't remember. They still advertise as a craft brewer.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's not Sam Adams. It's the Boston Brewing Company.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. I just finished the IPA variety pack.
Oh, nice.
Not bad. Not bad. Yeah.
That's my reaction to all of their beer.
Right. They don't make bad beer. They don't make...
I believe it was their
good beer.
I believe it was their blueberry beer, which is the only one I've ever poured down the drain.
Ooh.
It was horrific. It was one of the most horrible things
I've never heard of it, so they must have.
I believe it was a winter. I believe it was a winter specials in one of the variety packs.
Why are you putting blueberry in your winter specials?
Because it's a winter berry.
Is it?
I think so. We're talking about a lot of things we don't know about right now.
That's true. Yeah, we should talk about hockey, which we do know about.
No more hockey, Matt.
What?
No.
I have a thing.
No.
Because this is an indie game cast. I have a refined game idea for you. So, the hockey game we were talking about isn't going to work. We're not going to...
Wait, you've come to that conclusion too?
I'm accepting your conclusion.
Okay.
I'm not coming to any conclusions. Who does that? Yeah, so we're not going to simulate hockey, but here's what we could do.
Okay.
We could simulate the hockey expansion draft. There's well, you thought the excitement of hockey was going to end with the Stanley Cup, but you're wrong. We just had the expansion draft because Vegas is getting a hockey team.
That's like the two worst things on earth rolled into one.
Where could there possibly be a better place to play hockey than the middle of the desert?
Yeah.
Sin City. But anyway, so this is actually interesting. In the expansion draft, they basically got to choose a player from every team.
Sure.
But the wheeling and dealing that the GM, the general manager, got to do was just incredible because he has to balance getting good players that are available with contracts. So here's what I'm seeing. There's this whole drafting mechanic.
Yeah,
oh man, it's gonna be good.
Play this game. I've played like 300 hours of it on the computer, except with baseball.
Oh, okay.
And it's called Out of the Park Baseball, and it's the best sports simulation game ever made.
But it's not hockey themed, and it's not a board game. So I'm just saying.
It couldn't be a board game. It's
all right.
One of these days, you're not going to be able to bring hockey into the podcast, and that will be a day of celebration. Let's talk about some indie games, none of which related to hockey.
That's true.
But they did relate to dragons.
Here be dragons. Here be pirates.
What?
Oh, well, I was just going through the different games. Yeah. But no. So
that was my segue. You just completely...
No, it was good. I took the segue. I just took it too far. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Dragons, specifically...
Dragoon,
yeah. So this was a game we played at... Well, you should tell them where we played games.
Oh, yes. At Christopher's in Porter Square. Every Monday, this guy who runs a company called Board Game Empire, John, I remembered his name this time, just hosts some casual board game meetup at Christopher's in Porter Square in Cambridge. And this past week, they had a indie game night where a bunch of local indie game designers and publishers came by and showed off their games. And Dragoon was one of them. which I first played like 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago at PAX East, And then it reemerged in front of me at this indie game night.
Was it published at the time that you played it at PAX?
It was the same game, and it had all the pieces. They might have been in the middle or just before their first Kickstarter.
Okay. Yeah, so they've had a successful Kickstarter and then an expansion Kickstarter, I think.
Yes, which happened just a few months ago, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
And Dragoon is an amazing looking game. It looks so good.
It looks fantastic and in a completely unique way.
Yeah, the mat is made out of cloth, so it just folds up. It's not a cardboard. There's no cardboard in it at all. Actually, no, there is cardboard. The town tiles are cardboard. Yeah. So they screwed up there in eliminating cardboard. But almost all of the pieces are metal. Even the dice are metal.
Yeah. Which
looks really cool. They have these really nicely sculpted dragon pieces with their layers, and they have little loyalty tokens that you can put on the board. Everything's metal, and it's really nicely heavy metal.
Yes.
Not like the music, but it has weight in your hand.
But if you're going to be a heavy metal band, you might as well sing about dragons.
Or dragoons. Are they called dragoons in the lore of the game?
I don't know where that comes from.
I wonder if it's a game about dragons.
Well, one of the action cards is called Dragoon.
Oh, so maybe these are just dragons and they're actually called in-game dragoons, and it's not just called dragoons, so the game... For the sole reason that the game would not be called Dragons. Because you don't want to name your game Dragons.
Yeah, we should have looked that up. What is a dragoon? I don't know.
I think they made up the word. I think they took dragon and added another O. And then we're like, a new creature. I mean, it's like the Penny Arcade joke that sci-fi and fantasy is where all the writers go to get rid of their extra Y's and Z's.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so, the game looks great. The dragons and the dragon dens, the loyalty markers are just beautifully made in different colors of metal. So, like, there's like a copper dragon, there's like a white metal dragon.
Yeah, there's like a silvery one, there's a gold one, and then a blackish one.
Yeah.
In the low light, the three lighter ones kind of looked like the same color.
That was actually a problem because we're playing at this Christopher's. It's basically a bar, fancy bar, but
it's a pub.
Pub. That's the word. Lower light. It was kind of hard to distinguish mine from Amber's when we played. Yeah, but the game plays 2 to 4. Mm-hmm. It's played on a 6x6 grid.
Yes.
Which like this beautiful cloth. Landscape.
Really nice art.
It's basically an island, a big island with human settlers, which are represented by these town tiles. Mm-hmm. And you play a dragon or a dragoon, and you have a home den, and then you kind of move around the island, either destroying towns and cities or dominating them.
I think you go and just
demanding tribute.
Yeah, there's some tribute. I don't know if you go there and like threaten to burn them and then you get tribute, or if you just look rad and then they like worship you as a god. Anyway, you can go there and gain loyalty basically through some fashion or another, and then you get kind of a reoccurring income from those towns.
Big picture mechanics. There's some moving about the grid. There's some combat. You can initiate combat by basically moving into another dragon.
Yeah.
There's some resource collection by, dominating these towns and cities for income. And you're basically trying to get to 50 gold?
Yeah, 50 points, which is your money.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple game, and it has a lot of promise. I don't know. Do we want to get into the negatives now? It looks so cool. Yeah. And so because of that, I want it to be a great game, but it's fairly disappointing. It's not bad.
Yeah. So I think a lot of our criticisms of the game stem around this kind of randomness that's injected into points of the play.
Into every part of the game.
Yeah.
Nearly everything you do requires a dice roll or involves drawing a card.
Yeah, so if you attack another dragon as a means of either getting gold or sending them back to their den,
You have a die roll.
You have a die roll, yeah. Tie goes to the winner, and you might have a card that gives you a bonus.
Tie goes to the winner?
sorry. Oh, man.
Tie goes to the attacker.
Tie goes to the attacker.
Which is always a nice touch, by the way. I like that.
Yes, that's the commit. I think of it as the
quantum.
Thing. Quantum.
Yeah.
But still, you're rolling die. For combat, you're rolling die to place these towns. So every round, you're going to place basically 4 towns on this 6x6
Well, it was number
grid.
of players plus 1.
Oh, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's random.
Yeah, you roll the 2 dice, and it shows you where on the grid to place them.
So, well, before we get into it deeper, to summarize, our criticisms are basically that there's too much randomness.
Unnecessary randomness, too. Well, I think we're skipping over the 2 most important parts of the randomness that really detract. That you have to roll a die to see how much tribute you get at the end of each round.
True.
And if you roll a 1, not only do you get literally nothing, you have to remove one of your loyalty markers from one of the towns.
Yeah.
Which could be a difference of like 10 points. And in a game that goes up to 50, that's a lot. And then if you roll a 6, it like increases your tribute by like 1.5 or 2 times.
Yeah.
Which can again be like 5 to 10 points.
So your very income is based on a die roll.
Mm-hmm. And then also the cards.
And then the cards. Although, yeah, I mean, that's definitely random. But I'm not sure I have as much a problem with the cards as I do with the die rolling. Because
I have a problem with how powerful the cards are.
The cards are very
I don't
powerful.
mind having a randomly, drawn from a deck selection
what's
of action
the average
cards.
card worth? Maybe like an action and a half. You get 3 actions on your turn. Some of them are just straight up.
No, one of them was like place a loyalty token on every single adjacent town tile.
Right. Which
in one situation in the game, I got to place on 4. That's like 10 actions.
Yeah.
To move to those places and then place loyalty on them.
Yeah.
One of them lets you just go 3 spaces and destroy everything in your path, which nullifies a significant number of actions.
I guess the only mitigating factor here is everyone draws cards at the beginning of their hand. You can cycle through them a little bit. They're all sort of powerful. So, yes, it is very random, but like we all got both of those cards that you mentioned. I forget what they're called, but the one that basically lets you go on a rampage and destroy towns, and the one that I think it's Menacing Roar, that lets you basically dominate everything around you at once. All 3 of us saw those cards in the course of the game.
Sure, but that wasn't necessarily going to happen. And
True.
even then, the timing of it is significant.
True.
Not only in what portion of the game you're in, but where you are on the board. I happened to draw it when I was in the middle of a bunch of towns.
They are very powerful. So it was interesting, though. So I asked the designer who was there teaching us after we played, I asked him, when in the design process did you decide to incorporate these like die rolls in key moments of the game, to this randomness? And he really likes that element of, basically, the better player is going to put themselves in a better position, but then it comes down to this, random factor.
Yeah, I mean, I could almost tell that his answer was one he had said many times, because that's got to be the first thing people ask when they play this game, if they're asking about the design process, is why is there so much dice rolling, and why are these random cards so significant? And I don't have anything wrong with randomness. There are very few like non-random perfect information games that I've played, let alone liked. I love a sprinkling of randomness. There are 2 problems here. The first problem, I think, is that there's just literally too much randomness. That, especially that tribute roll, is so significant. Like, I got a 6.
Like you said, if you roll a 6, you could get
Well, I rolled a 6, 3 times in a row, and I
Right.
surged ahead.
So
I had like
if you-
twice as many points as you. at
If
one
you
point.
currently have a couple cities in a town, then that's like 14 gold for that 6. Whereas if you rolled a 1, you
would
get 0
nothing.
and lose the town.
Yeah. I don't understand that decision. Well, I don't understand why it's so significant. It could have been a factor of a point or two between, per town or whatever. It could have been like the distance between rolling a 1 and a 6 and everything in between could have been shrunk easily. And I think it would make a substantially better game. But as it is, it's just so powerful.
It's interesting. So the way that this movement happens, it's a 6x6 grid isn't that big.
Yeah.
For 3 or 4 players. It could have had a much more not chess-like feel, but kind of calculating area control, protecting feel. Mm-hmm. You only have one really piece that you're moving, the dragon. Mm-hmm. But it could have been way more calculating if there weren't these random factors in the game.
Another thing I think is very significant is that, well, let's talk about our game. I was ahead a large portion of the game due to getting that one card where I got like 4 at once, 4 towns at once, and rolling 6s.
Yeah.
And so I was substantially ahead. But ultimately, you won the game, I think, for the sole reason that I was sitting to the left of Amber. Because it has that power grid thing and Komet, where the person last chooses the turn order. And in this game, because you can take so many substantial actions, going last is a huge advantage, right? Because you can take away, if you have one of those cards or a powerful card, you can take away from the leader. You can do things that can't be fought against until the next round. So you can do something to get a bunch of tribute and then cash in on that and then not have it opposed until the next round.
Yeah.
And because Amber was in last most of the game, she chose me to go first because I was to her left, and I felt like that hurt me so much because everything I could do then was just mitigated by you guys. And then because I could never go last again, I could never recover.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The way the map was randomly generated, I ended up not interacting with the two of you very much. I interacted with Amber early in the game a little bit, but the two of you kind of duked it out more over that glut of villages that was right in between you. Right. So yeah, I wasn't as affected by that turn order, but I think you're right. I think that if you had been going last, or even
second to last, in front of you, or behind you, I mean, I think I could have pulled it off.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. It also has that 3-way dynamic of like Amber and I were both doing the things that we could to steal your gold to keep you under 50.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. Yeah. That's almost any multiplayer game.
But it's also like compounded with that random factor. Like at one point in time, it came down to, I think Amber attacked you, and if she won, she was going to steal your gold to knock you under 50. Mm-hmm. If she lost, you were going to be above 50 and win the game.
Yeah.
And she won.
Right. And then that kept me down, and you...
Yeah, and then a couple turns later, I rocketed past.
It's interesting to me, we hadn't talked about this very much before. Like, we talked a little bit about how we thought it was too random, but as we're discussing it, what comes to mind is that it doesn't seem like we have many quibbles with the game on principle. Like, it has a heavy comeback mechanism in turn order, like Komet and Power Grid. It has randomness, which I don't think is necessarily bad. I like games with randomness. I think it's just a matter of scale.
There's absolutely.
Just too much randomness, and it's too severe. And one thing that's important to note, from a game design perspective, the traditional Euro game design idea is that if you're going to have randomness, it's better to have pre-decision randomness rather than post-decision randomness. And in this game...
It's all post.
Except for the cards, which you draw before you make the decision to use them. But everything else is post-decision. And I don't necessarily buy in that pre-decision randomness is always better. But It's just a matter of scale. There's just too much and it's too significant to make the game interesting. At a certain point, when a game's too swingy and there's too much going on, you feel like you lose your own agency in the game, and I think that's what happens here.
I agree, yeah. So, I don't know, it's a funny case study because, I mean, the game's published and it's out there, and it was made intentionally. But I feel like we would really like this game if he had, picked a different mechanic for combat and for stealing gold, other than just a die roll. I think there could have been something extremely interesting, and obviously, the production is great, interesting, unique. It's kind of a shame. I feel like it's a shame because
I think it could be a much better game.
It could have been
I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's probably a lot better as a family game with smaller kids.
Right. It's just kind of frivolous. Like, why? Yeah. Why spend an hour playing that when you could play, I don't know, Suburbia or something?
Or even like Carcassonne.
Carcassonne, yeah.
Which I think is one of the games the designer mentioned when he talked about kind of games like the kind of games he likes to play. And that really, I was very confused because there's not that much randomness in Carcassonne. I mean, especially compared to this game. Like there's again, the pre-decision randomness of drawing the tile, but the game's designed as such that you then have two very important decisions of where to place it and what to do with your workers. I don't know. Again, not a bad game, just kind of mediocre for me. I wish it was better, especially when I look at it. Like it looks so cool. Moving now to another game we played that night that unfortunately was extremely disappointing. I don't even remember the name of it. It had to do with pirates.
It's the Pirates of the Caribbean. Yes.
Which is a strange name. The name seems to be entirely to justify itself.
Yeah, let's say this. The name kind of has all of the mechanics of the game within the name.
I think it seems like at least they came up with the name first and then designed the game.
So the game is about being a
pirate rat.
And you're trying to collect pies.
That's not in the name. Why pies?
Pirate.
Oh, it is in the name. Yes. Okay, yes. Never mind.
Of the Caribbean. And then there's this
there's an action called the Caribbean, which is apparently a real bean.
Yeah.
It has, to my knowledge, no relation to the Caribbean. It might relate to the Caribbean. Maybe they grow in the Caribbean.
I don't know.
But I don't think they relate to rats or pie.
So we should say this is a successfully Kickstarted game. There have been a couple expansions on Kickstarter.
Or they're about to release expansions on Kickstarter?
They've done at least one, and I think they have two planned.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
So somewhat it's out there on Kickstarter. But I think we agree we were not impressed with the gameplay here.
Yeah, because it was the first game we played, and either the designer or at least someone from the company was there, and she was very excited to show us one of the games. And she's like, well, I have this game about rat pirates. And I was like, oh, cool, that sounds interesting. And I have another game that was like a dexterity game with dice. And I'm like, let's do the rat game, because that sounds interesting. And they had these cool play mats they had made set up, and like, oh, it's a card game. And it was just increasing levels of disappointment as the game went on, I think. And I feel really bad saying this, but at the same time, like, it's a published game, and I'm, a game reviewer here, and I feel bad on one hand about criticizing games too harshly, but on the other hand, I feel like to be professional, you got to be honest about it. So I'm just going to say, this was a very, very bad game.
Yeah, so run through the gameplay real quick, because it'll be short.
So you get 3 cards, and there are a couple types of cards. You have rats, which are your main resource, and they're the art's good. It has rats.
They're like your pirates.
Crew. They're your crew. And then they have action cards of the take that variety. Of like, aha, you don't get what you wanted to get. Those kinds of cards. Those are the only types of cards. And then the pies, which is what you're going for.
There were charisma bonuses.
Oh yeah, charisma. I forgot about that. So you get your cards, and then you just put them down in front of you, unless they're an action card, because there's no reason not to do that, which was disappointing because you don't really have a choice there. And then you're trying to build up enough strength with your rat cards to meet a certain threshold to steal a pie. And the pies give you points. And then you have these charisma cards which help you steal rats from other crews, from other players. And then the action cards that I talked about. So you get your hand of cards. If the rats are charisma, you place them down in front of you, and they give you a certain point total of strength in loyalty and charisma. And then everyone goes around and decides if they want to steal a rat from someone else or if they want to protect one of their own rats. And we worked it out that in almost every situation you want to steal, in like 95% of the time. So there's not much of a choice there. And then starting with first player, you all go around and do that thing. And then usually like 80% of the time it ended up with everyone having the exact same strength they had before, because you're just stealing the highest strength pie rat that you can.
Yeah.
And the charisma cards are plentiful enough that you're usually just able to get the highest one on the board.
And then the final thing is that you go in turn order and use up your rats to get
pies.
Pies, which are the scoring points.
Yes. And yeah, there are no decisions in the game.
Yeah, that's just it. There are no decisions because the cards you draw, you put down in front of you.
There's no reason not to.
And then
you're almost always going to steal.
And then
you just steal the highest powered one that you're able to.
And then when it's time to take the pies, the first person in the turn order that can take them takes them, unless someone has a take that action card,
which like destroys one of your rats or steals it, or something like that.
So I mean, there's not much. I guess there's not much to talk about here.
Not much to talk about.
I guess the thing is, we come across these games that I just like aren't made for, like they're not aimed at. I mean, I guess gamers?
I don't know, because the lady was very nice who was teaching us the game, and I think in our discussions she talked about other games she enjoys, and they're the kind of games we enjoy. It just wasn't a good game. It was kind of along the line of like Munchkin or Exploding Kittens.
Yeah.
But didn't have any moments of surprise or excitement that those games potentially have. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to, again, I feel bad about it, but I have to be honest, it's a bad game.
I get the sense it's the kind of game that, kind of a family might enjoy with kids, but it's not a game I would recommend to that audience. I would say there are better games you can play with your kids.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess, that's the audience that would enjoy it. The theme was fun.
Sure.
And incredibly punny. I'll give them credit for that.
Yeah, many puns.
Like you said, it doesn't lead to interesting decisions. And really, I guess that's what, in a light game like this, it's not very long. It's fairly simple. It's very simple. At least give interesting decisions.
Right. That's the core of what a game is interesting decisions. And I don't think that the game that gives you the most interesting decisions is necessarily better, but you have to have that. You have to have decisions that are interesting, that are real choices. Even on family level games and kid games, it's the same thing that I talk about with movies. Like, I talk about, how this is kind of a tangent, but, when I see like the new big blockbuster movies or superhero movies, I'm often somewhat disappointed. And the rebuttal to me is always, well, it's good as just a movie or just entertainment. And you have the same argument with kids' movies where it's like, oh, that movie wasn't very good. And the response is, well, it's made for kids. But that's just a complete cop-out. Like, there are good kids' movies. Like, look at what Pixar has done over the years. Like, there are good kids' movies. Look at, like, the original Willy Wonka. Look at, like, these things can exist and they can be intelligent. And I think as a culture, when we talk about any kind of sorts of entertainment for the family, or especially for children, we do ourselves a disservice by just lowering the bar.
Yeah.
Kids are smarter than you think, and it doesn't help anyone when we pander to them. It just increases the popularity of poor kids and family products.
And we're not... So
and I'm not saying that this company did that. This is a very broad tangent, mostly about movies, because I'm a movie nerd too. But it seems along those lines where it's like, oh, this game got popular, but it's bad. It's like, oh, but it's just supposed to be a lighthearted, fun time.
So I'll say this, and it wasn't like they, it wasn't like they were espousing this philosophy.
No,
of game
not
design.
at all.
But even as we sat down before we knew about the game, it was clear that this was it was going to be a very punny experience and kind of lighthearted, and that's fine.
But there are great games that are that.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
that's not the excuse to not make a good game.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's my rant for that game. Apologies if you were part of the making of this game and are listening to this. I really do hope their other games are better, because it's got to be hard as a new publisher. I think this is their first game, and part of me has to be humble. I've never made a game. Making a game, successfully kickstarting it is a big accomplishment. I just hope their future games are better. So speaking of first time games from new publishers, we got to play test a game.
Yeah.
From a friend of a friend, or the dad of a friend.
Yes.
From me, it goes through you.
I'm the
to
friend.
The daughter, to the dad and uncle who actually made the game.
Yes. Yeah.
And we got to do a play test of the game, of an almost complete prototype.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. It's the first time I've done like a real play test. So I came into it and I didn't know this person, and she knows that I review games, and it's like, well, how critical do they want me to be? How nitpicky do they want me to be? And I was very nitpicky on the rule book, but which I hope helps them out, because some parts of the rule book weren't written very well. But
and that's a hard thing completely besides making a game.
Yeah.
So I think that was well taken.
Everything I've read says that like the hardest part is writing the rule book. And like me, part of me thinks is like, okay, I've written logically and very linearly, like since I was 12 years old, building debate cases and stuff. I could write a rule book. I have the feeling whenever I actually design a game and I get to writing the rule book that I'm going to find it like 10 times harder than I expect. So I'm trying to brace myself for that, even though deep down I'm kind of prideful. It wasn't a bad rule book. It just had a couple of things. And it was a decent game, I think. It was kind of a resource collection. At least part of the idea of the game is that it has a modular board, and there are a few different setups, and like even like main objectives to the game change as the setup changes. And from what I understand, talking to this friend of ours, we happened upon an extremely resource-heavy board.
Yeah, so that's kind of the interesting idea here is, how do you make... I guess it's like a replayability question, or how do you make each game unique, each play unique?
And I think they have a very interesting way of doing it.
It's very interesting. So the actual modular map changes basically randomly 3 map sections out of however many there are.
I think they said 5 in the base game, and they'll have expansions later.
Yeah, and so not only does the actual selection of which modules are in the game, but also the geometry of what order they're in and stuff like that matters.
Right, and not only does it matter in terms of what resources are available to you, or in what how close they are to each other, but the objectives of the game are tied to the map boards. So in our game, there was one that involved moving a dragon around a certain number of times. There was a dragon that could destroy things in its path. That was one of the objectives. The objective on the second board was building a certain building until all 3 copies of that building were built. And the third one had to do with fighting a troll monster and its minions or something a certain number of times. Yeah. And so it's this kind of high, generic high fantasy thing. I kind of They had a whole page of like lore that I skipped over, but now I kind of wish I didn't. But I was trying to figure out the rules quickly because it was a blind play test.
Yeah.
And you move around, you establish like workers on different resource spots to give you resources, and then you can build buildings and then do other things based on the map tiles. And there are also action cards involved that let you do certain things, and those are also tied to the board. The buildings are all unique and tied to the 3 different board segments. So everything's really, you almost get like these 5 board modules.
Yeah.
And then you pick 3 of them, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I think what we found in this game, and I'd love to play it again to see if this really was as big of an outlier as I think it might have been. But like resources were pouring into us. Yeah, it felt kind of nice because usually it's very hard to get resources in games.
It was kind of funny in the, it's one of those games where you have to get your engine going as soon as possible.
Right.
And I think Tim and you and I all had the same idea of we were going to go for, I forget what the resources were, but let's say stone, so that we could build this particular building that would
give us passive wood income. Yeah.
And we all had this idea, and then I think I was the third of the 3 of us, so I ended up having to do something else. But basically did the same thing with another set of resources. But we all did that in the first round. And then
by like round 3, I felt like I was getting like 10 to 15 resources a turn.
Yeah, and
of the varying types.
The big point scoring buildings were in the ballpark of like 12 to 15 resources.
Yeah.
Different.
So like very quickly we were getting to a point where we're like we could buy an end game building basically. So, or at least the highest point scoring building like once a turn.
So that's a really interesting problem is if you have this modular design, what happens when all of the resource heavy modules come out?
Right.
All of a sudden then it's just like a mad exponential rush to the end.
Right. If this really was the outlier and this was like as resource heavy as it could possibly get if you planned it out, I think it's okay. Because it was still a pretty fun game. It was all right. It felt, again, a little bit too easy to do things. I never felt, usually on these kind of resource gathering, engine building games, like the key fun part of the game is like the tension of trying to scramble to get the resources you need in a very tight space, as edging out other people and things like that. And in this one, it was like everyone kind of got to do what they wanted to do, and then I think mostly because I was first player, I ended up winning the game.
Yeah.
Because I got 1 extra turn.
Yeah.
And that was about it. It kind of just, it very quickly got to the point where everyone was just kind of sitting around doing, getting the resources they needed and then just doing the action they needed to get to trigger the end of the game.
Right.
I guess it's the opposite problem that we have with some Euro games where they end right when it's getting fun. This game, it got fun and then it stayed too long.
Right. But yeah, exactly. Because it felt like we just had these crazy engines of resource gathering. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's a shame we only got to play it once because it is a modular game. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what it's like with...
I want to play a really, really tight... I want to play the tightest map construction.
We looked at the maps, and at least one of the ones that we didn't play with was just barren.
Oh, yeah, they had nothing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we play it again, I'm going to ask to just give me the 3 tightest on resource maps possible, and let's see how it goes. Because I want to see what the other end of the spectrum is, and if it's still like really breezy to accomplish your objectives, it's not going to be... I'm going to be disappointed if that's true, but I'm hoping it creates almost like a fundamentally different experience. Because that's what I think that's kind of what they're going for, is like each game is going to be very different. It's kind of like the sales pitch for 504.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of, yeah.
But not quite as stupidly ambitious as 504 different game constructions. And by all accounts, that game did not succeed very well at all. And I think what they're doing in this game is a lot more manageable. So I'm hoping it kind of accomplishes that sales pitch, and we just got a very weird outlier game.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that I was kind of thinking of in comparison, we've been playing Near and Far recently, which has these beautiful maps. It has this booklet, and you turn the page and it's another map, and each one has a central town, but then these paths that go out different lengths and kind of a web of paths that you end up adventuring on. Mm-hmm. So playing this game, playtesting this new game, it had a more kind of static grid configuration.
Yeah, it was just a square grid.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I don't know how much you would have to change the gameplay at all to get kind of this...
To do a point-by-point map?
Kind of a point-by-point map with, like almost just some beautiful cartography, we'll call it. I'm not really looking for a gameplay change, just... make it interesting with something other than a grid.
I don't mind the grid.
Yeah, really?
I mean, I think hexagonal grids are almost objectively better than square grids.
Okay.
I mean, by certain criteria, they definitely are, right? Because you have the problem with square grids. If you allow diagonal movement, that's basically giving a diagonal movement 1.5 times as power as an orthogonal movement. But if you don't allow it, then it's costs 2 to go diagonal when it should cost 1.5. You have that weird problem. If it's a hexagon, it doesn't matter because everything's equidistant as it should be almost. But the big thing for me is that I wish the map was tighter. And I don't know if lessening up on the resources would help that, because we played at 4 players and that's the maximum player count. And even at that player count, there were plenty of resources to go around, and there was plenty of space to go around. And they do have a combat system in this game, and it just didn't seem necessary. If it was just 2 players, like imagine a 2-player game on that map, like you could just spend your time like divided up. One person takes one half of the map, the other person takes the other half, and never interact with each other at all on the map, right, and still accomplish everything you wanted to accomplish pretty much. Yeah. So that worries me a bit, that it's just too open, not only on the resources, but spatially. I would like it to be a lot tighter and meatier. And that might not mean shrinking the map. It might mean changing like movement rules for your soldiers, or adding another class of soldier that
But again, with
can do other things.
Just thinking of the near and far thing, with near and far, you have point to point, so you can create whatever kind of web of movement you want. Mm-hmm. I think that'd be really interesting to have.
Oh, I think it would.
Like a modular near and far.
And it wouldn't be hard to do modularly. You just have like 2 or 3 lines that hit the same spaces on the side each time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I think we're going to be able to play test it at least once more, I hope. And I would love to see, how it progresses. I think it's fairly close to being like the final build, but
yeah, I know that they have plans for a Kickstarter
fairly soon.
I think.
Okay,
yeah, within the next 6 months, I believe.
Okay, it'll be interesting. I definitely want to play a much more tighter map construction next time to see what the other end of the spectrum is. All right, moving back to the indie board game night, we're going to be closing off with the game that we just played right at the end.
Yeah,
we were thinking of going home, and I'm like, it's me, so I want to play as many things as I possibly can, squeezed into the time frame.
I was thinking the same thing.
And there was this game sitting out there called Chesscolation.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, is a cool name.
It's cool.
I like it. It sounds like the name of a heavy metal band, almost.
I don't know.
Or maybe a song from a heavy metal band.
Yeah.
Like a nerdy one.
Maybe
like math metal.
Okay.
Now there we go. Now
you're hitting. Now you're hitting.
Okay. Sounds like the name of a nerdy math metal band. Chesscolation. Anyway, it's a chess variant kind of game. Played. It took us a while to remember this, on a 6x5 grid, 5 rows across, 6 rows deep, and it was really good. And I wasn't expecting it, really. It kind of blindsided me.
First of all, I should say, I am awful at chess.
Oh, me too. I talked about this on one of the posts on the site.
Yeah. We should talk about that time we duped Orion into thinking we were okay at chess.
Yes.
We, Orion and Wes were driving back to Boston from Pittsburgh.
Right.
And he texts us and says, "Hey, want to play me in a game of blind chess?"
Because him and Wes were doing it on the road, right?
Right. Like Orion was driving and
Playing the
beating
game
Wes
in his head.
in Orion's head.
And Wes had the game like going on his phone or something.
Yeah. Orion's really good at chess.
Yes.
So anyway, he texts us and say, "Hey, I challenge you to a game of blind chess." So,
but only him being blind because he's driving.
Yeah. So ostensibly,
I think he was challenging me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, he's still gonna beat me,
right?
Even though he can't see the board because he's that good. I'm that bad.
I want to say that it was my.
It was your idea?
Yes, my devious idea that we simply set up a hard mode
chess computer
on like chess.com or something, and put his moves in as our own, and then report back to him what the computer.
And I think he lasted pretty long.
He did fairly well. We won in the end.
I remember at one point he was like shocked at how clever our moves were.
When he arrived in Boston, he wanted to talk strategy.
Yeah, I wasn't even paying attention to the strategy of the game because I don't know anything. I think he was pretty mad at us.
We're good people. We told him what we did almost immediately.
And yeah, it was pretty mean of us.
Yeah, but we're awful at chess. So yeah,
I believe he's forgiven us by now. Maybe I don't know.
It's one of those things where he's so much better at chess than we are that I don't feel bad.
I felt bad.
Yeah. So anyway, so chess-escalation.
Chess-escalation.
This is Mark and I playing.
And so how it works is you have your king out like in normal chess, and that's in the middle back row. And then you have these, across the second row, each side has basically pawns, but they're worse than pawns.
Yeah. Because recruits can only go forward.
They can only go and capture forward one space at a time. So they're your basic unit for the game. And the rules are you can move a piece, like in chess, or you can place a new piece on the board only if it has a greater point value than all of the other pieces on the board individually, not combined. And each piece shows exactly what its point value is. Like 1 up to 9, I think the queen... Or no, the queen was 10, right? Queen was 10.
1 to 10, yeah.
1 to 10, yeah. Or
and you place it in your half.
In your half of the board, yeah. Or you can swap a piece on the board. So you remove one piece and put another piece. As long as that piece, the piece you're putting on, has a greater point value than the one you're taking off. And you cannot add a piece to the board that creates check. That's the only other rule, basically. And it created a really fascinating game because, normal chess, it first of all, it kind of bypasses... Well, it bypasses a lot of things that chess has, right? The openings, the development of your pieces, that kind of first third of the game, from what I understand, where, you have, like 100 standard openings or whatever, and you have all the responses, and then you're developing pieces and getting into position to play the game. In this game, that takes like 2 turns. Because you could just, if you wanted to, you could just place the queen down turn 1 in position to, do some real damage. It would be a bad decision because,
probably,
as we found out later, you want to place the lowest point value piece you can afford to place, or else you lock yourself out of being able to place new pieces.
Maybe,
but it really gets to the exciting part of the game to us noobs very quickly.
Yeah, one thing you haven't mentioned is that on this continuum of up to 10 points, there are unique pieces at each value. And so they move in ways that are more complicated or more nuanced than just regular chess. So you have your typical bishop, you have your typical rook,
knights, you have the queen.
Yeah, but then
you have all the chess pieces, except the pawns can capture in front of them for some reason.
Yeah, but then slightly more complicated than that, are like, there's like a spy that can just move forward or
backwards diagonally.
Yeah. And then
the Lancer was cool.
What was that?
That was the one that can only move straight forward as far as it wants, or it can move passively to either side of itself.
Okay.
So it can move like to the right or left as long as it's not, but it can't capture to the right or left. It can only capture straight ahead.
Yeah.
So you kind of move it along across the rows and like jab it at something.
And then kind of right under the queen's point value are the
general, maybe? I don't remember their names.
Well, it was like the bishop king and then the rook king. So like they move like a bishop or a rook, but then can also move
one space in the other direction.
Yeah, yeah.
And they also had a couple of pieces that could attack at range. So it had like the catapult, which could attack like 2 up and 1 over on either side without moving. It just kills a piece, which was kind of cool because they're defensive units, but once your opponent gets close to your king, they can't do much because they're only like backline defensive, blocking a couple spots units. And the game not only goes, another big thing about the game is not only goes to checkmate like real chess, but it also goes to 50 points. So there are 2 different win conditions, which makes it interesting because to me, the first part of the game was not only you were able to be very aggressive and kind of put pieces like already developed on the board, but you were also playing this really passive aggressive Cold War kind of game where you're just trying to line up favorable trades because everything you put on the board could almost be captured by another piece. So you're trying to line up favorable trades where you can get higher level, higher points just from, you kill another piece and then they kill you. And so the first part of the game was really cool because I was just trying to create good trades everywhere and then just wait for Matt to pull the trigger on it. So which happened at one point, and then I got ahead of points. And then once I was ahead in points, I was able to do some very bold things. And I was really trying to put you on the defensive.
Yeah, so what I was trying to do at a certain point, a couple turns in, I was like, okay, Mark has a little bit better position than I do, so I'm just going to try to wreck his units and let him win the point battle.
Yeah, and you were going to go for checkmate.
So I was going to go for checkmate, which is kind of cool that we
had completely different philosophies on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe after 10 plays, we would settle on what's better. But it was really interesting that we were doing different things. As it turned out, at the end of the game, I had the better position.
Well, you locked yourself. You played your queen at some point during that big battle in the middle.
Yeah.
Which effectively locked you out of placing more pieces because I killed all your... Well, I ended up killing all your lower point pieces, and then you just had the queen and like the 8-point piece.
I had the 9-point piece out, so the queen was the only thing that I could play.
And then that was it. And then you literally couldn't play anymore until I killed your pieces, but I had enough points where if I did kill them, you would lose anyway.
Yeah.
So we got in this situation where Matt puts me in check, but I could just move and kill his queen to get the final 10 points I needed to win the game, but I would still be in check, which, according to the designer, had never happened before.
Yeah, so that's
so we're like, well, what's the rule? And he's like, well, I don't have a rule. I guess I should make a rule for this. And then we discussed what the rules should be, and I think it settled on me winning. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it settled on you winning, but we were really unsatisfied that you remained in check.
Well, Amber was fully on the side of you can't win while in check.
Yeah.
Which I think is a reasonable decision, but I kind of wanted to win that game because I thought I played very well.
I'm actually really happy that's how the game ended because I just felt completely like...
I felt like I had the momentum the whole game.
Yeah, you had the momentum. I mean, I was happy with like the... Like I said, I kind of cleared your pieces off the board there for a bit. I guess I kind of executed my strategy. It wasn't a good strategy, but... Well, I mean, at the end of the game, I was attacking your king rather than the other way around.
Well, and the interesting thing is that unlike real chess, where, they do have point values for the pieces, but just kind of in strategic terms, so you can kind of get a rough estimate of who's winning or who's losing. based on points. But that's only indicative of who generally probably has the best position in the game. In Chesscalation, it changes the game much more dramatically because if you're ahead in points, all you have to do is just trade out to win the game.
Right.
So you can then take more risks, which is what I did, which kind of put me in hot water because you were doing some pretty crazy stuff with your high-powered pieces while I was trying to get at your queen and be more aggressive, but I should have probably just played more passively to begin with. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I really want to play again because I want to explore these really new dynamics that seem... And again, I don't play chess that much, but I kind of know a bit in theory. But it seems like it plays with kind of the emotions and the broad level strategies of chess in new but kind of familiar ways.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really fun.
It was fun. It's hard to remix a game that has been like the best game in the world for hundreds of years.
Well, not the best game.
Oh, well, yeah. It's like the game. I don't know.
Chess and Go.
Chess and Go. Okay.
Well, I mean, the old games that are still around today are chess, Go, and backgammon, basically.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But backgammon's more of a gambling game. It's kind of like halfway between a board game and a gambling game.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but it's hard to remix a game like that. And so my expectations were definitely low for a remixed chess. But it turned out to be, put us into these really interesting strategic and tactical decisions.
Yeah, and because the board is smaller, it actually is a more familiar, or it's a more friendly entry point to kind of chess ideas.
Yeah.
Because there's just not as much space to think about, like physical space.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder, though, if there's a more significant first player advantage in this game because it's so much about trading pieces and getting favorable trades that it seems to me, and I can't explain exactly why, it seems like first player advantage might be a real thing.
Yeah,
and it is in chess a bit. I think it's like a 3% advantage or something, but it might be more significant here. I really want to play this with Orion to see what he thinks of it because he's the chess player.
Yeah.
But I kind of just want to play with anyone again. I want to kind of figure out this game and test out new strategies.
Yeah, so best case scenario, I feel like this game has kind of that infinite possibilities replayability of chess, but also has kind of those interesting macro strategy decisions of, do I go for the points victory? Do I go for the checkmate? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's exciting. I don't know. This kind of game normally isn't my cup of tea, but
I'm not a big abstract game. I respect them more than I like them usually.
It's the respect, but that's a good way of putting it.
Well, I think you were touching on something interesting in that it has a lot of the micro tactical things of chess are there in terms of like establishing board control and trading favorably, but it changes a lot of things in a more broad macro sense.
It's easier
because you have the point victory.
Yeah, and because it's a tighter game, smaller grid,
and because you can bring pieces back. They're not gone forever.
It's easier for those macro decisions to
influence you, I guess, more.
Yeah, influence in a noticeable way.
Yeah. I mean, over a bunch of plays, it might end up being a dud, but I don't think so. I think it has a lot of potential here. And we will say that we talked with the designer who taught us to play and everything, and if you're a publisher out there, he is looking to be published.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if I was a publisher, I don't know how well abstract games or chess variations do like on a market level, but in terms of like a good game, I would be all over this as a publisher. Like I think it really works well.
One thing that you haven't mentioned is the pieces were actually really good. So he had wooden pieces, mm-hmm. and on the top of the piece was a little mini diagram. Board that actually showed exactly what movements that piece could do.
Which is not only looks cool, but is clever in a sense of that it teaches the game without having to remember anything.
Yeah, as we said, there are unique pieces for every point value from 1 to 10, but that was not any problem at all for us in the first game because we could see what the pieces did. Well,
it's just such a clever idea because, part of chess is just, that's hard for me at least, is kind of the spatial visualization. Like, I know what all the pieces do, but it's very hard to kind of look at the board and know which spaces are threatened and all the potential moves that could be played when you're looking at not only a smaller board, but one that have the pieces that show you exactly what they're able to do. Even though you know, it's a bishop piece, I know what a bishop does, but even just the aid of just seeing it on the piece itself makes it just that much a little more friendlier.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. But I think we'll go ahead and go to what you're getting to.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, in addition to that little helpful diagram on the top, the height is indicative of the point value.
Yeah.
So the 9-point piece is a little bit higher than the 8-point piece, all the way down to your recruits, the lowest points that are, very thin.
Right, yeah. Which, again, as a publisher, I don't know if it's probably not viable with wooden pieces. I don't know the expenses of things, but maybe plastic pieces, you could do a very similar thing.
Yeah.
Where the heights change. I think that's awesome. Because, again, it's just another visual cue that not only makes the game look more dynamic and interesting, but actually aids the players in understanding the importance of things.
For sure. It's interesting. In our game, I was more aware of how I was maxed out, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I had my 9-piece out and the queen is the only thing I could bring out.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in an all-in situation. But it was cool to visualize because I had the tall pieces on the board. You had, I forget what you had, but...
I had a variety of things.
You had a few more pieces of varying heights.
Right. And that's just, it's just clever design. Like, one of the principles of game design is that you want important things or high-powered things to be somehow bigger physically or distinct visually. These have to be distinct from less important things. I think I mentioned this before. I saw a really interesting talk on video games. I believe it was about the Halo games where the designers were talking about, it was a sound design thing, where they're talking about how not only do they need to have the guns, the alien and the human guns sound like they look like they should sound, but their power needs to be tied to the sound itself as well. So a more powerful gun on a strict mechanical level, if it does X points of damage, needs to sound more powerful than a similar gun that does a little bit less damage. And I think this is a way in this particular board game where he's able to do exactly the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's cool. So I hope he gets it published soon.
I hope so. And that wraps up what we played this past week. Like, we played entirely new games. We haven't played...
Yeah, no, I mean,
before
new
that,
to us, but pretty much new to most people. A couple of them have already been kickstarted, but...
But still, I mean, I went to Board Game Geek, and most of them... I think Dragoon maybe has, like, a couple hundred reviews. Everything else is basically nothing. So, these are not well-known games. And in the one case, not even published yet, or in two cases, but... It's kind of fun, even though there were, only one that really excited me a lot. It was fun learning new games and kind of talking with the designers and looking at the games from a different perspective. Because normally we're just playing games that we, have researched and have gotten highly favorable reviews already. And we kind of know what they're about and we know it's our kind of game. It's kind of interesting to see the ones that are attempting to get there and see where they succeed and where they don't.
It's cool to see kind of there's a rawness to games in development. I mean, all 4 of these games that we've talked about are either published or close to publish ready.
Yeah, rawness is kind of the right word, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to seek out a bunch of indie games or try to go to meetups or whatever where this is happening a lot, because I think what would happen is we'd see patterns and just bad game design choices after a while, and that might get annoying. But in this experience in particular, I think it was really fun, even though, again, there was only one game that really excited us.
Huge shout out to John at Empire Games for pulling that indie game night together.
Board Game Empire.
Is
the name of it.
Board Game Empire. Yeah, it was really cool to see people from kind of, a couple hour radius, different publishers come.
And if you're in the Cambridge, Boston, Somerville area,
absolutely come to Monday Night Game Night.
Yeah, Monday Night Game Night. We're not there every week because we also do Frisbee on Mondays, but I'm there pretty much every other week, I think. I think I'm going to alternate it with Frisbee.
Yeah. When it gets cold out, it'll be every week.
Yes. And that'll be fun. And that's it for today for the IndieCast. Remember to check out the website at thethoughtfulgamer.com. Also remember to rate and review this podcast if you enjoyed it on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And hit me up on Twitter and Facebook where I talk about things I do during the week.
Literally hit Mark on Twitter.
Yes, if you find a way to physically hit me through Twitter, that will be interesting. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel. As I've been talking about, I have been putting the podcast up on YouTube because I know some people like to listen to them that way. But also subscribe even if you don't listen to the podcast through YouTube, because at some point in the fairly near future, I will be having video capabilities and put up some video content there. So I'm very excited about that. And I would like to have people actually see that stuff. So make sure to subscribe to The Thoughtful Gamer on YouTube. To conclude, I usually end these podcasts with a quotation, and the one I found that was relevant for today was from the blog of Ignacy Trzewiczek, who is the person behind Portal Games, who makes great games such as Robinson Crusoe. Not an indie game designer, but he has some really interesting stuff on his Board Game Geek blog, where he talks about the design process and play testing and all of that designer-publisher stuff. And at the end of one of his posts, he says something that I think is pretty relevant. He says, don't blame designers for being creative. Don't ask them why they didn't come up with that stuff a year before. It doesn't work like that. The designing process never ends. We'll talk to you again next week. Bye.